The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional before making any decisions based on the information.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and we are broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories, and I am joined, as always, by the paranormal crime-fighting duo Daisy and the Sundance Kid. And just today, as we were making our way back to the silo in the war wagon, we saw circling in the sky radioactive, flesh-eating California condors. I don't know what they're doing in the Dakota Territories, but they are here, and we are on the lookout. I've got Daisy and Sundance here with me, and they are working security in the silo tonight, as always, and keeping an eye out. It's been another very hectic week. It's been one of those weeks where I'm in the process of having a insane amount of work done to the silo, and so it's one of those exhausting weeks where you have people in your house doing work for long periods of time and trying to get other work done around that, and all of that's been tough. We continue our little ride on the Great Space roller coaster this week as we traverse into the great month of October and all of the juicy webbot predictions that are in the air about to manifest in our event stream. We'll be talking about those tonight, and I thought we would do a special episode. This was a strange week. I thought all week about what the major topic should be, and all week long it kept repeating in my head, we really kind of need to take a step back and take an assessment of the situation. What is the situation? The situation is basically looking at where we are from a paranormal perspective in the unfolding, manifesting in the eternal now event stream of our reality matrix. In other words, let's take an assessment of the last few months up to where we are now, how that's matching, not matching, webbot predictions, and not just webbot predictions, but cyber prophecy in general, which is more than just the webbot. Cyber prophecy encompasses, Vedic astrology, remote viewing groups, the Schumann resonance indicator, webbot predictions, and ancient prophecies all together to basically provide you with a page of indicators. Maybe that's what I should be working on, is a website that has indicators for each one of those things, kind of like you see on a stock chart, which I look at plenty of those. But no, I'm not a stock trader or anything like that, but we will be covering tonight really deeply in our assessment of the situation, strangely enough, cryptids and cryptos. So that's sort of the title of tonight's show, is Cryptids and Cryptos. We're going to be discussing in depth where we are right now, an assessment of the situation of the cryptozoology world, including Bigfoot and Dogman mysteries. And we're going to be discussing cryptocurrencies, and I can guarantee you that this is the only show where you're going to see how and why and where topics like that even belong together. So welcome to my world. This is the Paranormal Intelligence Agency, where you get to see the cross links between all things. And really, what's interesting is running asymmetric yet parallel to the WebBot predictions are really what's going to be some interesting occurrences in the cryptozoology world. Will play into all of that eventually in time. But, you know, and this is sort of an assessment of where we are, you as listeners, and where I am as the host of the show here, and in my own preparations for what's coming. So this week, there was a lot of, you know, paranormal in the news tonight is all 3i Atlas, because that's all there is. It is flooding the intelligence streams that we monitor, and that was predicted by the WebBot. Now you have to remember that the WebBot predicts what major language trends will be in the future, and from that you can infer what has occurred. Well, irregardless of what 3i Atlas is, and there are some scientists claiming it's a comet, it's not. But there are some scientists claiming that. And irregardless of what it ends up being, it will have caused the change in our society predicted by the WebBot by virtue of changing conversations. And there is enough press out there all around the world. If you do open source intelligence gathering, like I do, enough press indicating that this thing is alien in nature. I have to say that the world's foremost remote viewer, Dick Alligator, over at Future Forecasting Group, a remote viewer that has credentials going all the way back, really, to the Stargate program. I mean, we're talking about one of the most accomplished remote viewers on the planet, was given a double-blind target, and it ended up, the target was 3i Atlas. He had no idea. He was able to ascertain that this object moving through space was being moved through space by a tractor beam of some kind, an extremely advanced form of propulsion. It's almost like whoever this is flying around in the ship has a beam beaming out from their planet that is so accurate and so advanced that it can like hit the ship and keep it energized, right, as it's going through space. And that's something that we have contemplated doing on the Earth. If you're into like science documentaries like I am, you'll be acquainted with the theoretical spaceships that they've thought about flying, where they shoot a laser and it actually is the laser that's propelling the craft. That's kind of like what this is doing, but on an even more advanced level. 3i Atlas flew by Mars, and when it did, our rover got a real good photograph of it. Take a look at that photograph, and you tell me that that's a comet. No way. And then today, Space.com, among many others, published new pictures of 3i Atlas, and it is clearly an alien spacecraft. And it's headed this way. So, it's supposed to arrive sometime mid-November. And, you know, my message at this stage is, you know, brace for impact. I repeat, brace for impact. Because the wave of ontological shock is assured at this stage. It will be hitting human society full force when 3i Atlas arrives, and all of the repercussions that come along with ontological shock. This is an assessment of the situation. Now, all of the problems that come along with ontological shock reverberate throughout all society and all humanity, all belief systems, all financial systems, you name it. All those little blocks that go into making up human civilization are about to get shifted around. So a big part of that is webbot prophecy that, or, you know, webbot data sets as they are called, not prophecy. I call it prophecy. But the webbot data sets that go back to the original Alta reports way back from the early 90s predicted this exact point where we are today. And a huge part of that prediction has to do with the death of the fiat currency system. Now, there's always going to be like a US dollar. You know what I mean? There's always going to be a local currency of some kind. But what's going to change is that those local currencies, and this is occurring right now, are going to actually be turned into digital stable coins, as they're called. And those are all going on to the blockchain. All of it. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, won't they be able to track everything? Yeah, absolutely they will, and so will we. That's the whole point of distributed ledger technology. Not a single transaction occurs that isn't recorded for everyone to see. Think about that. And every transaction can be traced to its prior location and so on and so forth forever. And there's various kinds of cryptocurrency, but the webbot makes it clear that as the death of the fiat debt system-based system occurs, and we're in that right now, there's going to be a flight to precious metals. Gold just broke its all-time historic high. It just broke 4,000 an ounce, guys. Happened today. I watched it happen on my live screen. And along with it is silver, which is reached $49.50 today. To break 50, I am assured, and the webbot assures, and all kinds of silver traders that I follow and have contact with assure me that all hell will break loose. And just today, I saw a gentleman who runs a bullion store, and, you know, he was like, it's already at 50. It's already at 50. Just go try to buy an ounce of silver for less than $50 anywhere right now. In fact, it's at 53. That's what you're going to have to pay for an ounce of silver anywhere. So you have the silver market, the spot market as it's called. That's all paper. Then you have the real silver market, which is the dealers out there in real world land that you acquire precious metals from, and those guys aren't selling it for less than 50 already. So that's where you're at with that. Fair disclosure, I'm heavily invested in silver and cryptocurrencies. I'm a firm believer that the prior temporal markers, as they're called, that the webbot was able to correctly predict mean that the probability for the occurrence of the implosion of the fiat currency system is higher than 90%. So you're talking about an extremely high probability. I'm a firm believer that precious metals are a great hedge against cryptocurrencies, and in some ways they are the same thing. Most of the experts call Bitcoin digital gold, and they call cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, which is the second largest by market cap out there, they call that digital oil. So you're seeing how these things are turning gold and oil into a synthetic asset that can be acquired by anyone. It will be the greatest transference of wealth in the history of humankind. So, cryptocurrency is at its 1971 moment. And, that was the moment when we were taken off the gold standard and the dollar became synthetic. It was at that stage that Wall Street exploded. If the dollar were still tied to the price of gold, Wall Street would still be a niche business, but making the dollar synthetic allowed them to create hundreds of different kinds of investment products, all based on the US dollar. And that created the greatest wealth boom this planet's ever seen. So what's happening now is that process, but that process is now cryptocurrencies. So there's a lot of experts out there, both in woo land, as we like to call it, and just in everyday financial land. I monitor a lot of streams from both sides, and they seem to concur with one another that there is vast amounts of gold being bought up by central banks around the world. That's why you're at a record price of gold. They wouldn't be doing that if they were certain of the currencies involved, and they're not at all. In fact, if you do a deep dive, you will discover that virtually every country around the world right now has their money printers on full blast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just pumping. Those things are just smoking. There's springs popping out of them, and they are printing money faster than they can get the paper to print it on. And that is the death of the system, because all fiat-based systems are doomed to die in the end. It is part of their construction. This is a natural thing that is occurring. It's just going to be pretty hair-raising for people who are not prepared, or not emotionally prepared, at least, for the cosmic wave that is incoming. Again, I'm telling you, brace for impact. So for weeks now, I've been telling all of the listeners out there to begin to really, I wouldn't say overly fortify your home, but make it secure and make it a place of refuge for you and your family. Get the work done that needs to be done now, because you might be looking at a prolonged period here in the future where finding workmen, skilled laborers who are able to actually get different kinds of repairs and things done. And along with that, the materials. availability, the availability to actually get simple materials to work on your structure. You could go through a very long, prolonged period where those just aren't available. And so it would be a wise thing to do that now, before all of this rapid change begins to take place. But the Webbot again says that, cryptocurrencies begin to take hold. We can discuss really for hours on end the difference in cryptocurrencies. For me personally, and I don't give out financial advice, I just prepare the way the paranormal information streams tell me to. And I relay that information, but to be really prepared for what's coming, you should acquire both if possible. And if you're somewhere in a large metropolitan area, let's say, and you're just barely getting by, and there's no way you're ever going to acquire some silver or precious metal or cryptocurrency or anything like that, I would urge you to do what you can to get out of that situation. There are places around the United States away from heavily populated metropolitan areas, and I live in one of these areas. People ask me where I live, and I tell them the truth. A long way from anywhere. That's where I live. I live a long way from anywhere else. Let's put it that way. It takes you a long time to get anywhere else from where I'm at. And what comes along with that is a place where there are fewer than 1 million people in the entire state, a place where there is constant building going on, constant new population coming in, and constant opportunity for people who have skilled labor. There is even a state-run apprenticeship program in South Dakota. For those of you who are interested, and the state will literally pay for you to become an electrician or a plumber if you'll work here. So, that's the kind of change I'm talking about, that you should be contemplating, because there is a way for you to get ahead. It's probably just not in a large metropolitan city where the rents are just brutally high and there's a lot of work competition and all of that kind of thing. So, and there's still time to make changes. But time is growing short. So before these huge changes begin to take place, Dick Allgaier had some more information this last week, which was interesting, just reconfirming his targets on cryptocurrencies. And if you're interested in the cross of remote viewing with cryptocurrency prices, you can find that exists from the world's best remote viewing group, which is the Future Forecasting Group, headed up by Dick Allgaier. And they've got a lot of other all-stars on there like Daz Smith and people that you should recognize if you're associated in Woo World. So that's something that you can also use. It's interesting to take their predictions and then look at charts of those currencies and see how well they match up. Very interesting stuff. Something I've been doing lately. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about in depth, where are we, an assessment of the situation with the Bigfoot mystery, let's say. Where are we in an assessment of the situation with Dogman, with paranormal happenings all together? because we've touched on all of that lately, and it all kinds of feeds together. So we'll get back to that right after this break.
I'm Sarah, and this is my story.
I'm Ellen, and this is my story.
One night, I was at a bar. I was having fun with my friends. I had one too many drinks. I got behind the wheel to go home.
I got a cab to go home.
All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a squirrel ran across the road.
It
happened so quickly, I barely had time to react.
The cabbie barely had time to react.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I can't believe it. I hit a guy.
I cannot believe it. The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Don't drive buzzed. It's a decision you'll never regret. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Shadows creep, monsters leave. In the woods, strange voices. Shadows creep in the woods, monsters leave. In the woods, bright noises. Mystical. Airwave mystical. Mystical. UFO. Alien overlord.
From ancient times to modern days, legends of creatures in sudden disarray. Hear them speak through frequencies. Alien connections.
Break it out, truth untold. Tune it in, cosmic mystery. Dark woods, where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? Bigfoot strikes through the veils. Dogman howls in the midnight tale. From the static, revelations pour. Portals open, dimensions roar. Truth, no disguise. Cryptid shadows creeping near. Through the static, voices clear. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers. Can you believe? It's the paranormal intelligence.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, your personal tour guide to the Twilight Zone, the minister of the sinister. I've got a face for milk cartons and a voice for smell-o-vision, and tonight we are talking about Three-Eye Atlas, and we're talking about an assessment of the situation. I say again, brace for impact. It is coming. So, Three-Eye Atlas incoming. We were just talking on the break. I'm putting this out there. I've got the theory that they're space pirates. This is a pirate ship, and it's out there doing pirate type stuff. I tell you, an interesting intelligence stream that came into the silo today was from some remote viewers that had targeted Three-Eye Atlas, and what they ascertained was actually quite funny. They said that whatever is inside the craft has a big ego. I thought that was so weird, right? A big ego. They're like, and we better be careful as a species not to bruise the ego of whatever alien is in this craft, because they are more advanced than we are. So, but they're not like, they said they're not hostile. They're just extremely curious about us. So, I think it's interesting that it chose to go by Mars first. You know, it changed its speed, changed its trajectory, changed its speed again, then it went by Mars. And as it was going by, the rover got a good photograph of it that you can find out there, and that clearly is not a comet. Looks like the Vixen's vault is gearing up for their thing here at 8 o'clock. A lot of conversation going on the Vixen's vault chat. But what's interesting is that it's coming in at the same time the webbot says that you're going to have an implosion, basically, of the current economic system. And you have to realize that it's basically like a bubble. Think of it contextually. If you're thinking about the construction overall of the worldwide economy, it's like a bubble. And it's easy to poke that bubble and pop it. Anytime you introduce an outside force, like an alien species, you're going to pop that bubble. There are all kinds of implications and reasons why that ends up taking place. And it's, you know, a big reason is the idea that, for instance, if you have a more advanced energy system of some kind that's able to, generate 0 point energy, that is going to alter economies worldwide, radically alter them. Right now, the main cost of manufacturing is the energy involved. The main cost of artificial intelligence is the energy involved. If you can overcome that one little obstacle, everything changes. Almost overnight. And along with that is the old debt-based system will just come down. Now, there are experts out there saying that Trump and the administration are pulling the world's most amazing sleight of hand, if you will. And what they think is happening is that the U.S. is positioning itself to tokenize its $37 trillion in debt and sell that debt out as a tokenized way to a world population backed by gold. if they're able to pull off something like that, it's possible that you get away from a total implosion of the U.S. economy, right? You can kind of fend that off if you have a radical way of reassessing the debt, which is really what that is, right? So, so we live in interesting times. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that's about to take place. And we're just going to have to see how that plays out. Now, in Woo Land, Paranormal Central here, we also have, you know, an assessment of the situation as far as where are we with cryptozoology. And, you know, if you're waiting for the discovery of Bigfoot to occur, then you missed it. Bigfoot was already discovered, and it was done so both by Adrian Erickson and the Erickson Project, and it was also done by the Sasquatch Genome Project, both of which are well known to people who have been in the Bigfoot field for long enough, will be well acquainted with what I'm talking about. And, you know, my team and my mentor, J.C. Johnson, were all part of that. We collected samples that went into that genome project. Nobody will ever convince me that the testing was somehow contaminated. It's impossible. There were over 100 samples sent in from researchers all over North America. All of the DNA matched. And it all came back part Homo sapien. These things are a half-human hybrid. Accept it. That's the fact. However it came to be, whether by cross-species breeding or whether by experiment from a non-human intelligence or otherwise, it occurred. And the species is there, and it exists, and it is currently a major problem that nobody wants to solve. Just imagine what happens the day after there is widespread public acceptance that there is, in fact, a species, a breeding viable species of apex predators growing somewhere between 8 and 10 feet tall, weighing somewhere between 600 and 1,200 pounds, able to traverse mountainous terrain at cheetah-like speed, bionic vision, can smell you from a mile away, can move so quietly that it can walk up behind you and whisper in your ear in the forest before you'd even know it was there. A creature like that, what do you think happens the day after that's fully, widely accepted by the public? That very next day, every single congressman and senator you can think of is going to get their phone calls, their phone lines blown up by constituents asking them, well, what are you going to do about it? And there's nothing you can do about it. Just try rounding up that species. It's an impossible task. And with one felt swoop, you will render every forest in North America completely uninhabitable to humans and shunned by humans. We won't go there anymore because, by God, there's this apex predator species living and breeding there, and we can't control it. That's the nightmare can of worms you begin to open, and that's just one part of it.
Yeah, and they don't even pay taxes, Jack.
I know, right? They're living here and they don't pay taxes. But I cover a lot of known evidence for the Bigfoot species. In my book, Bigfoot Unleashed, it does have over 60 reviews now on Amazon and has almost a 5-star rating. So if it's something that you're interested in doing a deep dive on and you want to help support the show, pick up Bigfoot Unleashed on Amazon. So, but you're talking about a problem that just cannot be solved. And so nobody wants that problem to be known. Why do you think we do have a few occasions where somebody has downed a Bigfoot creature and they notified the authorities and the authorities confiscate the body? They've done that more than a few times. And the reason why, and the whole thing gets covered up because, oh my God, you want to talk about pushing domino 1 in society? That is domino 1. You hit that domino and they all go down. Because if Bigfoot can be real, and it is, what else have they told you couldn't be real that is possibly real? That's the ultimate can of worms. And they know it. And they will do anything to keep that a secret. Absolutely anything, including employing, we're told, groups of special force type operators to go in and clean out groups of Bigfoot in problem areas. So that is something that has been widely rumored, speculated, and reported on in the Bigfoot community for many, many years. So, and where does that leave us with Dogman, right? Because with the Dogman mystery, you have a lot of the same parallel running aspects. Take the two phenomena side by side, remove the head off the creatures, and what you have is basically the same mystery. You have a long-running, multi-decade history of eyewitnesses to these creatures. You have indigenous oral history talking about them. You have physical evidence being left at the scene in the form of fingerprints and other DNA. And yes, Dogman DNA has been recovered. I can tell you without a doubt, it has been tested by competent means, and it has been found that just like Sasquatch DNA, there is mitochondrial DNA that is Homo sapien. In other words, the female lineage on both species came back Homo sapien. That's just a fact. So we also have a report from the guys out at Skinwalker Ranch that they encountered an entity, and that same night, 1,000 miles away, the guy who had the main encounter with this entity, his wife experiences a Dogman on their property. How is it possible that that occurs and they're not related? Of course they're related, right? And in the assessment of our situation, we can't ignore any of that. So how do you begin to explain it? When you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, has to be the truth. And although it is improbable, it appears as though there is an entity that resides at Skinwalker Ranch which is able to quantumly entangle itself with the observer in such a way as to create paranormal effect, even to those that that person is associated with. Think about that. I mean, they described what occurred in the hitchhiker effect at Skinwalker Ranch as being a paranormal virus. It starts off with one person and then it begins to affect all the people around them. And it spreads out in circles, just like a virus. It gets weaker and weaker as it goes till it dissipates completely. Strange stuff. But that's where we're at. That's our assessment of the situation. Where does that lead us? It leads us into a theory of the so-called demiurge, this idea that there resides on the earth a being of some kind that is able to shapeshift. It's able to alter form into many different kinds of creatures that we would find disconcerting, to say the least. And one of those things appears to be the dogman. In the human psyche, there are few images that will exhibit or pull out terror in a human being like a 9-foot tall, upright, bipedal, werewolf-like creature. Very few things are going to scare a human like that will, right? And that's exactly what they experience. Now we have to begin to ask ourselves, are all dogman sightings really sightings of this other being pretending to be something that it's not? We have to ask that question. How else can we explain the sighting of the dogman 1,000 miles away to the wife of the intelligence agent at Skinwalker Ranch who had this occurrence? We can't. Right? So we have to take that into effect. We have to take into effect that 3-Eye Atlas as an assessment of our situation appears to be a real alien craft headed this way, space pirates. And maybe they got a wicked case of space herpes. We don't know, but it's possible. And they're coming this way, right? And what are they going to find? Well, if we are to believe 80 years of insider and whistleblower testimony, what they're going to find is a species, a hominid species that calls itself human, that lives in a state of ancient historical amnesia as to its origins and where it's even been on its own planet, who has somehow, through ontological means, able to acquire alien technology, which would be equivalent to cavemen discovering an iPhone and being able to replicate it significantly enough that they could weaponize it. That's what it's showing up to. And there are a lot of Webbot indications, and even Cliff High mentions in his recent letters to the public that, it looks like the governments around the world are firing up the UFOs. Fire them up, boys. Here she comes. That's what you're looking at. That's the true assessment of where we are right now. And then you have, all kinds of other cryptozoological type animals that are being proven to exist right now, like the Tasmanian tiger. Those are Lazarus species. Lazarus species are, if you're a cryptozoologist out there in the world, or a aspiring cryptozoologist, and we need more of you. But let me assure you, cryptozoology is the absolute hardest of all professions. It is a profession which you are never, ever going to make any money at, and a profession that you are little thanked for, and you have to do it because you are obsessed with the subject matter, or don't do it at all. But if you are a cryptozoologist out there in the world, we're going to have to begin to entertain the notion that there are also interdimensional cryptid animals. And some of those animals appear to have, like the entity at Skinwalker Ranch, the ability to shift into different creatures. In the ocean, they have the so-called mimic octopus, the most amazing creature I've ever seen. It's one of my favorite animals. And the mimic octopus can make itself look like a lot of different other animals. It really amazing. It can change its shape and it can change its color, and it mimics the shape and color of other animals. And it does it so well that you would never notice the difference. That's what I'm talking about. A mimic cryptid animal that exists on the land in our forest. And I believe there is sufficient evidence for that. That's also part of our assessment. I believe cryptozoology will begin to discover more and more evidence of that being the case. Going forward from here, there are a few names out there in the field that have the highest probability of causing that first domino to fall. I would put Robert Kreider up there at the top. You know, people have asked me a long time about Todd Standing. You know, I did a personal undercover, you know, on the down low investigation into Todd Standing. And instead of investigating his video and photographic evidence, which, if they're real, are the best photographic evidence of Sasquatch ever. That's just the way it is. Hands down. High definition, right? You just can't beat that. And it's part of the reason I believe that there is no video or photographic evidence that will ever be sufficient enough to prove that species. But I was lucky enough to have personal relationships with and was working with people who knew Todd Standing personally and had traveled there to work with him in the field. That's as good as it gets, because the people that I had personal relationships with were people that I trusted inherently and still do to this day. And they assured me of a few things. They assured me that to them it appeared as though what he discovered was not a hoax. It appeared to them that he was somewhat mental. That's what was relayed to me, that he did some crazy stuff in his car and stuff like that. But the most important thing that they relayed to me was his financial situation. And Todd could barely get by. Driving a broken down old beater, living in a really crappy apartment, barely getting by. And then I took his footage and all of his evidence and I showed it to a real professional Hollywood makeup artist. And they assured me that it would be extremely difficult to do. It would cost at least $20,000 on the low end, and to do it out in the woods would make it a very, very difficult thing to pull off. That's what they relayed to me. I took that to me and I said, well, if I gave you $20,000 and flew you out there, could you pull this off? And they said, maybe. It was their opinion, however, that that's not what occurred. They said the number of people that could pull off a makeup job like that, you can count on one hand in Hollywood. There's no way. Absolutely no way. And then you have a bunch of people say, oh, well, he admitted his sister was a makeup artist. Well, you know what I discovered in my personal investigation? She was a makeup artist at the makeup counter at Macy's. Yeah, that's not a Hollywood makeup artist. Not even close. But all the detractors will make it sound like that. So, you know, I have to assess after all that. And by the way, they also said the guy was an a-hole. None of them liked him. So there you go. But that's my assessment of the situation where we are tonight, guys. We're going to keep track of the event stream, and we'll talk about it again next week. Stay tuned for the Vixen's Vault.